Hey guys, it's Kim. I'm back. So this is the recap of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This little beauty right here who is thick. She's thick. And beautiful, by the way. I love this cover. Like, I still like my OG covers, don't get me wrong, but I love this cover. I like the new covers too. Okay, so I posted the review separate, but it's definitely a 5-star. If I could give it 10 out of 5, I would give it 10 out of 5. I normally do not have a favorite Sarah J. Maas book, but this is my favorite Sarah J. Maas book. So if you haven't watched my videos before, I'll just give you a brief. So I read a lot of books, and sometimes it's a while before the next book comes out. Like, the rumor is that it will be 2023 before the next court book comes out. By then, I will have forgotten a lot of what happened in this book. So I started making these videos as a way for myself to go back and watch them to kind of refresh my memory. So that's the whole purpose of the video. This is not how I normally look. I normally have my hair piled on top of my head and my glasses. But A Court of Thorns and Roses, if you can't tell, was like, had me feeling some kind of way. And so since the book was a whole mood, I decided to do a whole look. So thus the Nesta braid and all this. So welcome. So we start off, Cass is going to Nesta's dingy, dirty apartment to take her to the river house. Nesta is in her trauma, okay? She can't have a fire because the crackling logs sounds like her father's neck breaking. Her father was killed right in front of her. The King of Highburn, who was their previous enemy, who's now dead because Nesta cut his head off, broke her father's neck right in front of her, and there's nothing she could do. And so the popping and snapping of the logs reminds her of that, and so she can't stand a fire. She has been, everybody in the story's been traumatized. Nesta was sexually assaulted by this boy named Maas that she was seeing, that she thought she might marry, and he decided he wanted the goods, the milk without buying the cow, and Nesta had to fight him off. There's just a lot, and Nesta is stuck in it, and she is there in her head, and it is not a good place to be. It is a deep, dark, jagged pit of despair. That's where Nesta's at, okay? And she is self-medicating with alcohol and meaningless sex with strangers. And that is her coping skill, and that's not a very healthy coping skill. So, this is where we're at in the story. So she has to run the random guy that she don't even know his name out of her apartment when Cassian gets there. And Cassian takes her to Feyre and Reese's new river house. And Feyre is her sister, and Feyre is like, you're done. Like, I am not going to keep paying for you to destroy yourself. You are done. You are cut off. This is the options that she gives her. You can either go to the human lands, and good luck to you, because they're scared to death of fairies and they'll try their best to kill you. Or you can go live with Cass and Az in the House of Wind and train with Cass and work in the library and do something meaningful with your life besides get drunk and have sex with strangers. So, this is basically Nesta's intervention. And Nesta, who, let me just say, before this book, I did not like Nesta. And I know there's a lot of Nesta stans, and now I'm one. Okay, I'm a convert. I'm a born-again Nestan. I did not like Nesta, and a lot of people will say, well, she was traumatized. Nesta was traumatized. That's why she's so mean. Okay, everybody in the book's been traumatized. And yes, people all deal with their trauma differently. But we can't say that it's okay for a father or mother to be physically abusive to their children because they were physically abused when they were children, and so they were traumatized, so it makes it okay for them to traumatize other people. No, it's not okay. Oftentimes that's what happens. People live out their trauma, right? But it doesn't make it okay. Somebody has to break the cycle. So at any rate, that doesn't change the fact Nesta has been through hell, okay? And I love and respect Nesta. But I just also am not, I don't romanticize Nesta's nastiness. So I said all that to say this. Nesta has, when Sarah first wrote the book, I believe she said that Nesta was just supposed to be the mean sister, right? And then her character got more fleshed out and more complicated and had more depth. And honey, she might be the deepest character Sarah has. I'm serious. Like, this is my favorite book now. Like, I love Nesta. But Nesta has just always been nasty and mean. And that's just that's what she does. She lashes out at people. So when Feyre cuts Nesta off, Nesta is nasty because she's Nesta. And says every nasty thing she can think of. And Feyre is like, nope, you're done. So, and she's like, and if you want to go get a drink, you can climb down the 10,000 steps to get there. So the House of Wind is like built on top of a mountain, I think, a hill, whatever. Anyway, there's 10,000 steps up or down. But the only other way to get in it is somebody has to winnow you there, and then you have to fly the rest of the way to the house. So basically, Nesta ain't going to get no drink. Okay? So the next morning, Cass goads her into eating because she has not been eating. And she tells him that training will not get him in her bed because she's Nesta. And Cass, because he's Cass, says, nah, you'll crawl into mine before it's over with. And I was like, okay, go Cass. I'm here for it. All right. So he takes her to the Illyrian camp, Windhaven, to train. But Nesta just sits on a rock the whole time. And then Nesta goes to work in the library. And the job that they've given her is shelving books, okay? So in the morning, she trains with Cass. And in the afternoon, she works 5 hours in the library. This is her new purpose in life. The magic house, because Rhys had enchanted the house that it, will feed you and take the plates away and all that stuff. So the magic house gives her food, but not wine, because she's cut off. And Cass goes to check on Lucian because Rhys wants him to check on the Illyrian legions in Windhaven and wants him to keep an eye on Lucian and Eris and the Autumn Court and what's going down there. Cass goes to check on Lucian. Eris is there and tells Cass that Baron, his father, who is the High Lord of the Autumn Court, is working with the human queen, Brialyn. Brialyn or Brialyn, I don't know how you say it. Brialyn is the queen. So there were 6 queens, 7 queens, I don't remember, in the human realm. They wanted to be made immortal. So they were working with the King of Hybern. That's how Nesta and Elaine ended up in the cauldron, which is another of Nesta's traumas, being forced into that cauldron and it literally changing every molecule in her body, and it wasn't a pleasant experience from what Nesta says. So they wanted to be made immortal, but when Nesta went in the cauldron, Nesta stole something from the cauldron, took power from it herself because Nesta was nasty. You don't mess with Nesta. And so she's like, all right, you want to force me into this cauldron? I'll take something out with me. Well, as punishment, the cauldron made Brialyn, or whatever her name is, the human queen, made her this old crone. She's still an immortal fae, but she's not young and beautiful like she was when she went in the cauldron. So she's got an axe to grind with Nesta and the fae. So Baron is working with the human queen, Brialyn, and they think that she is working with this guy named Koshai, who is the bone carver's brother. So this immortal pre-fae being, okay, very, very powerful being. Eris tells Cass that a unit of his soldiers went missing. Ness is like, F it, and decides to try the stairs because she's like, hey, I'm a fae now. So I'm stronger than a human. She makes it to 100 steps, which that's still nothing to laugh at, y'all. Makes it to 100 steps and has to turn back. And she's literally crawling up the last steps when Cass is like standing there waiting and has to pick her up and tells her if she would come to training, she would be stronger. Az tells Cass when Nesta goes off to bed, he's like, you're in deep, right? and says, do you think you guys need a chaperone? And Cass is like, I thought you were the chaperone. As like, I don't know if I'm enough. Because Cass and Nesta have this like tension, y'all. This kind of tension. So the next day, again at the Illyrian camp, Nesta again sits on a rock and it's freezing cold. And so he's like, you can go in Reese's mom's house and warm up, but there's a fire and it's popping. And so she goes in the shop and she makes friends with Emery, the shopkeeper, who is a female Illyrian who, because she was a female, had her wings clipped involuntarily, because that's what they do, because they don't want females flying away, finding something better than a misogynistic pig. So later in the library, Nesta like is working and kind of has this run-in with one of the acolytes named Gwen, and Gwen kind of gives her some snark, and she like basically like tells on her to Clotho, and Clotho's like, yeah, I don't care. She's doing important work. If she asks you for something, do it. Help her. The house tries to feed Nesta twice, and she's just like, I'm not hungry. I don't want your food. Me. So then when she is ready to eat, the house is like, do, 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 until Nesta says, please. And then the house feeds her. And when she says thank you, it gives her cake. So the next day at dinner, Ness is talking junk about Reese. And that sets Cass and Az off, because they love Reese like a brother. Reese is their brother for all intents and purposes. He's also their High Lord. I mean, they go off, okay? And Cass kind of says something mean to Nesta. He's like, that's why everybody hates you, because you act like this. Ness goes to the library, and Cass goes outside to cool off, and Feyre talks to Cass and tells her that Nesta was always their mother's creature. Like, their mother never had anything to do with Feyre, but she always crooned over Nesta and said that Nesta was her little queen. And so, and apparently from what we get from the book, their mother was nasty. So that's the behavior that Nesta learned. So she's talking to Cass, and Cass gets this idea, because she says something like that Nesta would never let herself be embarrassed or something like that. And so he gets this idea, and he goes to give Feyre a kiss on the cheek and can't, because Reese has this like super shield over Feyre. So the next morning, Cass offers to train Nesta at the house, because he realizes, she probably didn't want to train at the Illyrian camp, because all the freaking Illyrian warriors, these people who have trained since they were toddlers, are watching her. So she's like hesitating. She's kind of hemming her hawing, and he offers her a bargain, which, Fae bargains are, nothing to sneeze at. They're a big deal. So he's like, if you will let me train you for 1 hour, I'll owe you a favor, any favor. And she's like, you're kind of setting yourself up there, bud. But he doesn't care, because he's so desperate because he knows if he can just get her going, that it will help her. So she says, I tell you what, I will train in exchange for a favor of whatever size to be determined later. So they shake on it. And of course, whenever you make a magic deal in Fairy, is it called Fairy? I don't know. You get tattooed. So they get these magic tattoos because they've made a deal. So that first day, they work on balance and breathing techniques, and it actually helps Nesta. Like, it actually helps settle her mind, and she actually feels better than she has in a long time. So later in the library, Gwen, the girl that she kind of had a little run-in with, tells her that she got the wrong book, and the girl that she's working for, Meryl, will kill her. And so Nesta secretly asks the house for the book. So the house puts the right book on her cart. She takes it to Meryl and kind of distracts Meryl and sneaks the book in there. Gwen tells Nesta that Meryl is researching Valkyries that died in the war 500 years ago. There were these fierce female warriors. So Gwen tells Nesta that she was from Shangri-La, which was this, I guess, like a temple city. and Hybern's army came and looking for one of the feet from the cauldron. They raped all the women that they wanted to, and the rest they killed. So Cass and Reese are, because I told you the point of view shifts, are meeting with Eris, and he tells them that Baron wants a war so he can take the Spring Court, because Tamlin, you know, whenever Reese and Feyre had their mating ceremony or whatever, I don't remember. That's what I'm saying. That's why I need the videos. Tamlin lost it because Tamlin and Feyre used to be together. So Tamlin is running around the Spring Court in beast form, not ruling, not doing anything a High Lord is supposed to do. So Baron, who's a mean somebody, decides that the Spring Court is right for the picking, and that's why he's working with Breland to have a war so he can take the Spring Court. Ness makes it to step 150 and has to go back. The house fixes her dinner, a book, and a bath. And Nesta tells the house that it's her only friend. So there's this darkness in the pit of the library that seems to have some kind of sentience to it, but everybody's scared of it. And they stay away from it. So Cass tells Ness during training that because he's trying to get her to open up, right? Because he knows that, you know, she has to heal, and healing starts by, you know, kind of letting things in and letting things out. So Cass tells Ness during training that his mother was raped, and then she was shunned for having a child outside of wedlock. Then she was freed, she wasn't freed. I wish she was freed. She'd still be alive. Then she was forced into manual labor until she died. Like, she had to do manual labor until she died from being run into the ground, basically. He was taken from her at age 3 and taken to the Illyrian training camps. Then at dinner, Cass is telling her about, I think he's just opening up to her because they have this relationship, right? But also to get her to open up, because if you want somebody to trust you, you have to trust them, like, you know, offer the olive branch first. So then at dinner, Cass is telling Ness about all the bad guys that he put in the prison. And he tells her about this one named Lanthus that about killed him. And Cass tricked Lanthus by saying, oh, I bet you can't get out of that ash mirror. And Lanthus went into the ash mirror knowing good and well he could get himself out. But by the time he climbed out of the mirror, Cass had already put the mirror in the prison. So Lanthus was stuck in the prison. He asks her about her power. And she goes to leave because she doesn't want to talk about it, because she likes to pretend like it's not there, but she also fights tooth and nail to keep it from coming out. So it's like, Nesta, girlfriend. So she goes to leave. He blocks her, tells her how amazing she is and how he thinks of her at night when he's touching himself. And by the way, Ness is doing the same thing. So then, at training, she asks about the priestesses, and Cass says he'll train, because she got this idea, I guess, the night before. She's like, what if, you know, all these priestesses, so all the priestesses in the library are there because something horrible happened to them, and it's just a place for them to kind of be safe and be away from males and be away from other people. So she gets this idea, because the training is helping her so much. What if they start training the priestesses? And she asks Cass, and Cass is like, I'll train anybody who wants to come to training. So she asks Clotho if it's okay. And Clotho's like, yeah, you know, sure. Anybody who wants to come can come. So she posts a sign-up sheet, but nobody shows up. And Cass tells her, just keep reaching out her hand. Which is also what Amren told Cass about Nesta, because he's just like at his wit's end. He's like, I don't know what to do. And Amren's like, just keep reaching your hand out. Elaine comes to visit Nesta. But Nesta is nasty because she's Nesta. It's just kind of par for the course. And she tells Elaine to leave. She heads for the stairwell. That's kind of like her thing. Like, whenever she gets mad, she's like, I'm going down these stairs to get me a drink. But it's 10,000 steps. So she heads for the stairwell and makes it to 1,000 steps. And when she gets back up, Cass is waiting, and she tries to brush him off, but he tells her, about how he took revenge against the whole freaking village where his mom lived. And then he goes to leave and she grabs him and kisses him and touches him. And it's very intense and delicious. And yes. And then she says something mean because she's Nesta. She says something like quick out of the gate or something. I don't know. Anyway, so the next day, Az takes them to the river house, tells them that Breland is working with Koshai to find the Dread Trove. And the Dread Trove is 3 magical objects that were made by the cauldron. And they have special powers. And one of them is a mask that can raise the dead. There's a harp that can control time and space. And there's a crown that can bid other people to do your bidding. So they're like, Breland's going, she's already got the crown, we think. Or, well, they think she's going after the objects. Because since she's cauldron made, she can find those objects just like Nesta, because Nesta's cauldron made. And Nesta's like, no. So then Elaine is like, well, I'll do it if Nesta won't do it. And Nesta's like hell you will. I'll do it. Because she doesn't want Elaine to do it. She asks Farrah, she's like, why can't you do it? Because up until now, Farrah has done all the saving of everybody. So Nesta's like, why can't you do it? And Farrah tells her that she can't because she's pregnant. And Cass and Az are in the sitting room later, and Cass tells Az to turn a blind eye because he's been thinking about what Nesta said this whole entire time. And he's like, I'm going to get her back. I'm going to get her back. So he tells Az, all right, chaperone, it's time for you to turn a blind eye. So he goes to Nesta's room and does all the things with his mouth and his hands. And then he leaves. The next day, Nesta asks, because he's been teaching her, they kind of have moved on to fighting techniques. And she's like, well, let me see it in action, so I can get an idea how this works. So, Cass and Az spar. And Nesta wonders what can't talk. Nesta wonders what it would be like to be between those two sweaty, strapping bat boys. And Nesta, in the library, later on in the library, she invites Gwen to come and train, but Gwen's like, no, that's not really my thing. So then Nesta hits the stairwell again. She makes it 2,000 steps. Cass gets called to the library the next day because Nesta is practicing in the library. And he notices she keeps dropping her elbow. And so he says something to her and kind of corrects her form in front of him. When they turn around, all the priestesses are looking at him. Clever Nesta. So Nesta was purposely practicing in the library after Clotho told her not to, because she knew Clotho would call Cassie and be like, you need to come get your girl, because she ain't listening. And the whole reason she did that was because she knew that if the priestesses could see the training, then they would feel more comfortable and be more willing to go. So the next day, Gwen actually comes to training. Cass takes Nesta with him to Windhaven, and she has lunch with Emery while he meets with Eris, and she invites Emery to train. And at some point when she's going to meet with Emery, she has this memory of Thomas, the woodworker's son, trying to rape her, and she bit his ear off and run. Good for you, Nesta. At dinner, Cass is like acting weird. And Nesta's like, what is going on? Like, what's wrong with you? What is going on? And he tells her that Eris called him a mongrel bastard. And so Nesta gets on her knees at the dining room table and shows him exactly what she thinks about that statement. And the next day she sends tea and spices with Cass to Emery. Then Emery starts coming to training. So then in the library, Meryl has figured out that Nesta switched the books. And she tries to get up in Nesta's face. And Nesta gives it right back to her. Because it's like honey. Like, come on now. How did you not know who Nesta was? You really thought you was going to come at Nesta and not get your feelings hurt? Really? It's Nesta Archeron. She could hurt Anna Wintour's feelings, okay? Anna Wintour ain't got nothing on Nesta, okay? So, Nesta gives Meryl what for, and so then more priestesses come because they're like, oh, I want to be like Nesta when I grow up. So they start coming to train him. Ness tries to scry because they had asked her to scry and try and find the object. So Nesta does. She tries scrying, but she can't see anything. In fact, she just gets overwhelmed by her memories, right? And so that night, while she's asleep, she has a nightmare. And apparently the whole freaking House of Wind, the whole mountain is shaking. Reese shows up and is using his power to try and contain hers, but he's having a hard time. And so Cass finally calls to her, and when he does, she like calms back down and goes back to sleeping normal. The next day, Cass goes to see Reese, and Reese is just like a wreck. Like, Reese is not his normal self at all. He's a wreck, okay? They found out that the baby has wings. Feyre is not Illyrian, so she doesn't have the right pelvis to birth an Illyrian baby. A baby with wings. She can't shapeshift into an Illyrian because they're afraid of what would happen to the baby if she does. And they've never successfully performed a C-section. So basically, Feyre and the baby could die. Will likely die. I mean, nobody who isn't Illyrian has successfully delivered an Illyrian baby. So Cass is like, well, you want to fight it out? You know, so Reese can kind of get his, you know, tension and worry and everything out. And so they do. And when he gets back to the house, beat all to hell, he tells Nesta everything. She decides to scry again and tells him once he's healed that he can F her anywhere he wants to in that house. So they go to the river house, and she is scrying, and this time she like erupts in silver flames, and she's like not herself. Like, she is taken over by something. We think it's the mother. Like, it is alluded to in the book that it's the mother. Anyway, it's the power from the cauldron. So anyway, she erupts in silver flames. The whole room is starting to like cool off, and they're calling her. They're like, Nesta, they're shaking her. Nothing's working. So Cass grabs her and kisses her and pushes his power into her. And then she finally comes back to herself. Cass, Az, and Ness leave the next day to find the mask in the Urid bog because she was successful in figuring out where the mask is. So the Urid bog is a swamp. And that is where a lot of the beings that were not put in the prison but predate the Fae have gone to live out the rest of their days. These are beings that eat people. Humans, Fae, they don't care. They will eat it. So they are flying around because they figure they'll just fly around and see if Nesta feels anything. So they're flying around. All of a sudden, Az is gone, right? So they follow his blue siphons, and he's surrounded by Eris's soldiers, the missing soldiers. So Cass puts Nesta in a tree and goes back to help Az fight. She can't hear anything, and she's getting worried. So she climbs down and looks in the water because she's trying to figure out where she can cross that to get to Cass and Az. And she gets snatched by freaking Kelpie. He pulls her under. He is like breathing air into her so that he can like kiss on her and lick on her and bite her and scratch her. And he basically tells her that before he eats her, she's going to be his bride. So yeah, so he's dragging her on the bottom of the swamp, and she reaches out her hand like calling for her power, and instead the mask flies into her hand. And so she puts the mask on, and next thing you know, Cass is screaming, yelling, looking for her. Next thing you know, here comes an army of the dead rising up out of the water, and on their shoulders is Nesta. And Cass and Azriel bow, and she takes the mask off and then passes out, and Cass grabs her. So they captured 2 of Eris's soldiers to try and torture them and figure out what's going on. But they're not having any luck. It's like they're enchanted. So they're going to have to wait for Helion to come from the summer court, I think, to figure out what kind of enchantment it is. So Feyre asks Nesta to stay the night at the river house. And Ness is bathing, or not at the river house. They were in the Moon Palace. These people got a lot of houses. And Ness is bathing when Cass brings her some food. And he goes to leave, and she's like, why don't you join me? Why don't you get in? And Cass is just like, So Nesta gets out of the water and goes to him. And she tells him, well, it's just sex. That's all it's going to be. And it is hot. It is very hot. And it is everything you wanted it to be between Nesta and Cassian. I can't even say their names. It is, whoo child. It's good. Now I can't talk. So when they get done, Cass gets up and leaves, and Nesta's kind of like, oh, he got some nerve. And he says, it's just sex, right? And walks out the door, and I'm like, Nesta Archeron, Cassian got your number, boo. He got your number. So the next day, Gwen works with Ness on the Valkyries. She's been researching the Valkyries, helping Meryl, and she found these mind-stealing techniques, which is basically like meditation. And so they start doing them together, and Nesta, it's the first time, probably ever, because I don't think Nesta's ever felt good in her own skin. It's the first time Nesta's ever felt comfortable in her own skin. And so you can see Nesta's getting all these little coping skills that are healing her, right? But it's not some magic thing. Somebody didn't wave a magic wand and Nesta was healed. Cassian's, didn't magically heal her. It is all these little coping skills that she has gotten. The breathing techniques with Cass, the physical activity, because that releases the good endorphins in your brain, the feel-good chemicals. The library work, because it's something productive. Then the meditation Valkyrie techniques that Gwen has shown her. So she's getting all these little coping skills that Nesta didn't have before. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. So the next day, after training, Cass takes Ness to the blacksmith because she wants to start training with weapons. And he's like, well, I want you to see how they're made so that you can respect the weapons and respect how they're made, blah, blah, blah. So he takes her to the blacksmith in town, and she wants to hammer the weapons. And so he kind of basically picks one that he doesn't care about and lets her hammer it, but she's really good at it. So he's like, oh, well, here, do this and do this. So I think she did a great sword, which is like the big sword, like ice, that Ned had in Game of Thrones. That's a great sword, a 2-handed sword. And then a regular sword, I think, and then a dagger. So three items that Nesta made. So after training the next day, Ness is hitting the punching bag, and Lucian comes by just to like check in and check on things and see how things are going. And Cass is like, what do you want to do? Because nobody likes poor Lucian. Like, Lucian really hasn't done anything to anybody, and I feel so bad for him, and I really want him to have a happily ever after. But I don't know if I want it with Elaine. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. I don't know what I want Lucian to have an HEA, but I don't know who with. So anyway, Lucian's like, some things should not be awoken when he sees Nesta training. Because he's like, I don't know who thought it was a good idea to train the dragon, but some things should not happen. And Nesta hits the wood so hard that it like breaks into splinters. And Lucian's like, mother help you all, as he's leaving. Then Helion shows up on a Pegasus. Because he's Helion. Helion just extra. So Helion shows up on a Pegasus and tells them, he goes and sees the soldiers, and he's like, they're under something, but it's not a regular enchantment or a spell. They're under something. And that's when they figure out it's the crown, that Briellen must have the crown, and she's using the crown to get the soldiers to do what she wants. Cass gives Nesta a fighting strategy book, and she wants to bring the Valkyries back. She wants to lead female warriors. So they have more sexy times. And she says she can't get enough of him. I can't do like Stephanie and get all up in the thing, but y'all. Hint, 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 Nesta. So, Cass and Ness get summoned to the river house. The blacksmith dropped off Nesta's items that she made because they're cursed. And, oh, not Nesta, just Cass. It's just Cass. So Cass gets summoned to the river house. The blacksmith dropped off the 3 items that Nesta made and said that they're cursed. Apparently, Nesta has made a whole new trove because Nesta is cauldron made. Nesta has the cauldron's power. Nesta made weapons. Nesta has now made magical weapons that have not existed for hundreds of years at least. So Amren doesn't want to tell her. She's like, I don't think we should tell her. She's not stable, and you need to be careful while you're sleeping with her because who knows what she'll do to you. I mean, Amren was really being kind of nasty. She wants Reese to use the items to become the High King. And Cass says that Ness deserves to know. He's like, it's not right. She deserves to know. So they decide to let Feyre be the deciding vote, which Feyre says, yes, Ness deserves to know. Ness and Cass go to the Spring Court to meet with Eris to try and get more information, get an update, what's going on with Briellen. So Eris is being a jerk to Cass, so Nesta gives him what for. Then Tamlin shows up, growling and spitting and whatever else, so she gives him what for. Nesta is not to be messed with, y'all. So Cass, she talks to Cass about, wanting to bring back the Valkyries or whatever. And he's like, well, you just bring me whatever you have and we'll integrate it into the training. So Cass asks her, like, if you had a blade, what would you name it? And she's like, why are you asking me that? He's like, just tell me, if you had a blade, what would you name it? And she's like, but why are you even asking me that? And he's like, well, those weapons you made. And she's like, yeah, so what? And so he tells her about them being magical weapons and about the vote. And Nesta is big mad. And Nesta heads for the stairwell and makes it all the way down the entire 10,000 steps because she big mad. And she busts up in Amra's loft and goes off on Amren and lets Amren hold it. Feyre shows up trying to diffuse the situation and smooth things over. And Nesta tells her that she's going to die. Yeah. Because Nesta lashes out at everybody. She does. She tells Feyre that everybody's been lying to her, that they all knew that she was going to die, and the baby will probably die too. And then Nesta, of course, feels like crap. Cass goes looking for Nesta, follows her scent down the steps, and then can't figure out where she went. So he goes to the river house. And Reese tells him to get Nesta out of the city before he effing kills her. So Cass finds her running through the city and scoops her up. And they stop by the house and get a bag from Az. And they head to the woods, to the wilderness. And they hike for days. I think it takes them like 5 days. Because Cass knew about this lake that was supposed to be this healing lake. And he knows what to do to help Nesta. And that's one thing I love about him, is that he supports her. She has to do it, but he helps her get there. He's her guide. He's her guide along the journey that is Nesta. So they hike for like 5 days. They have to stop overnight and sleep outside and this whole thing. And then when they make it to the lake, Nesta finally lets the walls down and just lets it all out and lets it all go. She finally is just like sobbing and tells Cass every horrible thing she's ever done and how much she hates herself, basically, and about her being scared of the fire. And, Cass feels like a jerk because he never put 2 and 2 together. I mean, but how could he? He's not psychic, right? He don't know. Like, he knew something about fire made her uncomfortable. And so it's just this whole beautiful moment, and he is holding her all the way through it. And tells her that, that she will make it through. And then, of course, there's sexy time. So, the next day at training, the girls have set up, so when they were reading about the Valkyrie techniques, the graduation ceremony for the Valkyries was they would hang a ribbon from a piece of wood or whatever And if you could slice through that ribbon with your sword, you were good enough to be a Valkyrie. And so the girls are trying to slice this ribbon. They can't do it. Of course, Cass does it because he's a flipping show off. And I like it. So Nesta talks to Gwen about music and how much she loved it and how much she missed it. And so Gwen invites her to come to the priestess's services in the evening. So she does, and Gwen is singing, and it's beautiful. And Nesta she gets so into the music that she just lets go of herself, and she goes into this trance, and she actually scries the harp. It's under the prison. Yes. So she tells Cass, who tells Reese. Reese drops the wards on the prison so that they can go in and get the harp, and he gives Nesta the sword, and she names it Ataraxia. So they go to the prison, but the room that the harp is in is actually like enchanted or spelled or warded or whatever. And Nesta is afraid that Cass would spring the trap. She won't, because she's cauldron made just like the harp. So she makes him wait. She goes in the room to get the harp. When she grabs the harp, she sees Breland, the evil queen, who also sees her. And so she asks the harp to break the connection. And he's like, pluck my string. Or it, I don't know. So she does. She plucks a string to break the connection. Her and Cass are on their way out. When they're on their way out, one of the cells is open. Lanthus's cell is open. The one that almost killed Cass. The one that he tricked to get into the mirror. So Lanthus, and he's supposed to be unkillable, right? Can't kill him. So he is fascinated with Nesta. And Cass tells her to run. She runs. She makes it almost out when she runs into more of Eris's soldiers. Breland has sent them to get the harp. So she plucks a string on the harp to get back to Cass. She does. Lanthus is whooping the both of them. I mean, they're both just getting beat up. She draws Ataraxia, and when she strikes him, he goes from this mist to actually forming into a person. This like human-like form. And he's trying to get her to be his queen, and he's giving her all these visions of how they could rule the world and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, all he wants out of it is the crown, and, oh, he could give her such pleasure and blah, blah, blah. But she's like, no, I already know what good, what is, and it's Cass. So Cass throws the dagger, hits Lanthus, and then Nesta cuts his head off. She plucks the harp again to winnow them to the river house. Nesta actually, she actually apologizes to Pharaoh. Nesta Archeron apologizes. This, the fifth book, this like thousands of pages, and Nesta Archeron apologized for the first time ever. So the healer is tending to Cass. And Reese and Farah tell Ness that Elaine told them, what a good dancer she was. About this story about how one time this girl had been mean to Elaine. So Nesta showed up at the ball looking like a queen and danced with this duke and took away the girl's marriage proposal. So they want her to dance with Eris at the ball, at the winter solstice ball. And Cass is mad. He's like, no, you're not doing that. So Ness takes him to the cottage and shows it to him and shows him the dresser that Pharaoh painted. And she picks up a rose wooden figurine that her dad made. So later in the library, Gwen gives Nesta and Emery their solstice presents. They are all going to be in the Valkyrie book that Meryl is writing. They're the Valkyries Reborn. So that night, she asks the house for a small fire. And she uses her Valkyrie techniques to face it. And she sits there until the fire burns out, which is a big deal for Nesta, because before she couldn't stand to be in the room even for a few minutes. So when it dies, there's little evergreen branches on the floor. So she follows them, and it leads to the pit in the library. So she goes down there, and it's like this pulsing presence. And she's like, this is your heart. She's talking to the house. This is your heart. And it kind of like caresses her face. And so she blows out her lamp and embraces the darkness of the house. So they go to the solstice ball in the Court of Nightmares, and Nest dances with Eris, and of course he is taken with Nesta. Then Cass cuts in because that's his woman. He's been secretly training with Moore so that he could dance with Nesta. Aww. So Eris offers Reese whatever he wants in exchange for Nesta as his wife. And back at the river house, Elaine and Ness make up. So, because they button heads. Cass had gotten her, okay, in A Court of Frost and Starlight, which was last winter solstice, Cass had gotten Nesta a gift. He was the only one who got Nesta a gift, I believe. I'm not making that face to be ugly. I haven't read it since it came out, so I don't remember. We didn't know what was in the box because Nesta was so nasty to him that he threw the box in the river. So we find out now what was in the box. So he had gotten Nesta this little miniature illuminated book for Ness because he threw it in the river because she was nasty. So everybody's at the river house drinking, enjoying the solstice, and Ness, because she's, working on sobriety, goes upstairs and goes to her room, the one that Feyre designed for her. Cass comes up and gives her his present, which is a symphonia. It's a little thing that records music. He went back to the Court of Nightmares and had them play so that he could record it for her. And then he went to all the taverns she used to go to and got all her favorite singers and bands to play, and he recorded it so that she could always have the music because he knows that Nesta loves music. And she starts crying and says she can't accept it. And he's like, but it was made for you. And she's like, well, then I won't accept it. And Cass is like, what is going on here? Like, he's mad. And she says, Eris is a brute and he's a POS and I'm going to marry him because I'm just like him. Oh, Nesta, you're not though, boo, you're not. So she tells Cass that he's good, that she doesn't deserve him. And then he's crying and he tells her that she's not marrying Eris because there's nobody else for them. And ever, and she says, you're mine and I'm yours, and the golden thread forms between them. Sexy times. So Cass stays the night. In the morning, he leaves for the snowball fight and to check the legions. Ness invites Emery and Gwen for a read-in in the library, and the house fixes them up some cots and some hot cocoa and snacks and the whole 9 yards for like a perfect girls' night in the library. Gwen brings stuff to make friendship bracelets. And they're all supposed to wish on the charm. Like if Nessa's making Gwen's bracelet, she's supposed to make a wish for Gwen on the charm. But Nesta, knowing that she's got special powers, says, let me do the wishes. So she takes all 3 of the charms and makes a wish for them to have the courage to go out into the world and always be able to find each other or something like that. So the next day, in training, Gwen is able to cut the ribbon, and Nesta takes the ribbon and ties it around her head and crowns her with it. And so that becomes their new kind of rite of passage for becoming a Valkyrie. The next day, the ring has been turned into an obstacle course, and each day it gets moved around and changed. It takes the girls 2 months to make it to the other side. Az tells them that their prize is that they have now finished the blood rite qualifier. So the blood rite, the boys in Illyria train to be warriors from the time they're little bitty children, okay? When they come of age or whatever, they get to participate. If they pass this test, this obstacle course, they get to participate in the blood rite. Well, the blood rite is where it's kind of like the Hunger Games. Like they're all dropped off in different parts around the sacred mountain Remiel or whatever. And if you survive the however many days, I think it's 7 days. If you survive the 7 days, then you're a certain level. If you make it onto the mountain, then you're a certain level. And if you touch the stone at the top, then you're the very top tier of Illyrian warriors. And there's only been 12 people who have ever made it to the top. And 3 of them were Cass, Az, and Reese. They all touched it at the same time. So they've been basically training the girl to say, see, you're so strong that you could go for the blood rite if you want to. And they even invite Devlin, who's, I think, the leader of Illyria, to show him, what they've accomplished. But they're like, nah, we'd rather just be Valkyries. It's fine. We don't want to be Illyrian warriors. So Nesta is so, jacked up by their success that she actually makes it all the way down, all 10,000 steps. And then goes all the way back up all 10,000 steps so she can go Starfall with Cass. Yes. At Starfall, Amren, speaks to her, and she gets on her knees. Nesta Archeron, y'all, gets on her knees and apologizes to Amren. Yes. And Amren tells her, you made the house. And Nesta's like, huh? And she's like, you made the house. Just like she made those weapons, she made the house because she wished for a friend. Y'all. Nesta. I cried so much in this book. Okay. The next day, Cass and Ness go to meet Eris at Amarantha's mountain. And he tells her that there's 3 sister peaks. There's the one, that they were under when they were under the mountain. There's Ramiel, which is the one in Illyria. And then there's the one that the prison is made out of. And so I'm sitting here going, there's 3 sister peaks crowned by 3 stars. 3 sisters, 3 brothers, right? You got Rhys, Cass, and Az. You have Feyre, Nesta, and Elaine. And I know these people who are like, it'd just be weird. It'd be weird for 3 sisters to end up with the Illyrian boys. Why? Okay, first of all, the Illyrian boys aren't blood brothers. But second of all, even if they were, who cares? I'm not trying to be, weird, but I have 3 aunts who married 3 brothers. 3 sisters married 3 brothers. And, they all stayed married until they died. So, why is that so weird? I don't know. Anyway. So, I'm just saying that I feel like there's basically this mystical reason that there's 3 sisters to go with the 3 Illyrian boys. Anyway. He asks about the harp and figures out that they've already got it. He's mad. He's ticked. And he asks for Nesta's hand, and Nesta is a smart aleck. So they leave, and Cass takes them to Valeris. They're walking around the city, and Cass is kissing her cheek and holding her hand and being all affectionate, and Nesta is being weird, okay? Cass is like, Ness, just say it. Just say it. And she's like, say what? And all I can think about is Edward in Twilight. Say it. Say it out loud. Except instead of vampire, she's supposed to say mates. So Cass shouts in front of God and everybody, we're effing mates. And Nesta, she's like, I didn't have a choice in any of this. And Cass is like, I didn't have a choice either about being shackled to you. And then he immediately realizes what he said. He's like, I'm sorry, that was a poor word choice, but the damage is done now. I mean, it's yes, Nesta is so tough, but at the same time, she's so fragile, and in any little thing just sends her self-esteem. So she's like, you know what? I'm calling in my favor. He's like, don't do this, Nesta. And she's like, you will not speak to me until I come to you or 1 week passes. So she gets Moore to winnow her to Emery's house in Windhaven, in the Illyrian town of Windhaven. And Moore gets Gwen, and they just kind of all talk and drink hot cocoa and kind of commiserate, and help Nesta feel better. So they go to sleep. And when they go to sleep, somebody snatches them. Somebody puts ether or whatever on their face and snatches them. Cass is like, well, Nesta didn't do a very good job with her bargain because I can just get Rhys to talk to her until she gives in and talks to me. So Cass gets Rhys to take him to Windhaven to Emery's house, but when they get there, Rhys is like, they're not here because, Rhys has his Damati powers, and so he knows that their consciousness is not there. So, when Nesta wakes up, she's surrounded by Illyrian warriors who are passed out, and she's like, I need to go, now, because she's literally in nothing but her nightgown and barefoot. So she's, you know, picking her way through the warriors or whatever and trying to get out as quick as she can. And she sees movement and realizes there's another warrior. And then she looks and there's a knife in the tree. So they both go running for the knife in the tree at the same time. He like barrels into her and they roll down the mountainside and end up in a freaking creek bed with the knife sticking out of his throat. So while Cass is freaking out at Emery's house, the inner circle shows up and tells Cass, they're like, you can't help her because the rule is that they can't have any outside help. They're not even supposed to have weapons. So it's like, where did the knife come from? And if somebody does help them, the person who got the help and the person who did the helping will both be executed. Like, there's not supposed to be interference. The whole point is to prove that you're strong enough to do it. So they're like, you can't intercede. Reese can't intercede. And they're like, oh, and by the way, Eris has been taken, so you got to go get Eris back. Cass is like, no, I need to be here for Nesta. Reese, you go. And Reese is like, I can't. And he has to tell them about the bargain. So Reese and Farah made this bargain that one wouldn't live without the other. And so when one dies, they both die. So Reese can't be going on no suicide missions because if he dies, Farah dies. So switches back to Ness. Ness is climbing a tree so she can get a better view, and her charm on her friendship bracelet starts glowing, and so she follows that direction. She kills another male, finds Emery unconscious in a river, stuck on a tree right above the freaking waterfall. She swims out and gets Emery and swims back, and she's looking for a cave when a male voice says, oh, there's a cave over here. And so they decide to share the cave with the male. Emery's still passed out. And Nesta sits up all night listening to all these, because there's all these beasts around this mountain eating Illyrians. And she listens to them eat Illyrians all night long. And then in the morning when they go out, there's plenty of clothes to choose from for her and Emery. So she gets Emery some clothes. Emery is awake. They head to find Gwen, and they see a nightgown hanging from a tree, and they're like, oh God, somebody's done snatched Gwen, and they're raping her. And when they go over the ridge or whatever, they see all these males sitting around a fire, and then about that time they get snatched. It's Belias. It's Belias, Emery's cousin, who is a jerkface. And he is about to rape Nesta when a beast shows up. Nesta and Emery make a run for it and run right into Gwen. Gwen had lured the beast to the camp so they could make a run for it. Switch back to Cass and Az, who are watching the castle in the human lands to figure out what they've done with Eris. And they're watching it for days, and they finally see Eris leave with Briolin in a cloak. So switch back to Ness. Ness, Em, and Gwen make it to the bridge. They're fighting. They have to fight some males. They get on the bridge. They're going across the bridge. Some more males show up. One of them shoots Gwen in the leg with an arrow. Gwen's like, go ahead. And they're like, no. So Nessa ties a rope to an arrow, shoots it to Gwen. Gwen grabs the rope, ties it around herself. Nesta and Emery tie the other side to a tree, and then Nesta cuts the bridge. The males go down. Gwen goes down, but she's attached to the rope. They pull Gwen up. Yeah, the end of this book is just like boom, 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 boom. They only have to last till dawn. And so they're debating, like, maybe we should just hide somewhere until dawn comes. And Gwen tells them her story. How that when the king of Hybern's army came to Shangarva, she hid the children. And when they asked her where the children were at and she would not tell them, the commander of Hybern's army raped her. And she still wouldn't tell them. So then he was going to have his soldiers rape her until she gave up where the children were at. But before they could rape her, Az showed up. And she was so grief-stricken because they killed her sister, her twin. They killed a lot of the priestesses. So she was so grief-stricken that she couldn't stand to be there. She didn't want to see her sister's grave. She didn't want to see the graves of her fellow priestesses. So Az took her to the library. So then Emery tells her story, and she tells them how her father used to beat her mother, that her father eventually beat her mother to death and made Emery bury her in the middle of the night, and then told everybody she died in childbirth. And then Nesta tells her story about every horrible thing that she's done because she thinks, well, you know, I'm just going to get it out there. And if they don't want to have anything else to do with me, that's okay. And they tell her, oh, God. Oh, that she hasn't failed anybody, that none of them have. And they decide, like, screw it. We're going to go for the whole thing. We're going to win this thing. So, switch back to Cass and Az. They are spying on the group when Eris ambushes them. He's under Breland's control. She's got the crown. Switch back to Nesta and Em. So, they're making their way up to the top of the mountain to touch the stone, right? There's some males climbing up behind them. Nesta tells Emery and Gwen to go ahead and she'll hold them off at the pass of Enelaus. So the whole reason they do this blood rite, right, was because apparently there was some group that was fighting the Illyrians. Excuse me. And this guy, Enelaus, and it reminded me of Thermopylae and the Greeks in the 300. There was this archway in the stone, and he knew that in that archway he could form a bottleneck and hold off the soldiers until help arrived. And so that's what he did. And so it's called the Pass of Enelaus, or Enelaus's Pass. So Ness is like, y'all go ahead. I'm going to hold off these males at Enelaus's Pass. And they're like, no, you know, we'll help you. But they're both injured. And Ness is like, no, you go. So we switch back to Az and Cass. They go with Eris to the lake, and the cloak, Breland's cloak, falls away, and there's nothing there. But Koshai is floating atop of the lake, and Az figures it out. He's like, "Oh crap! You know, this was all just to get us here to help Koshai." So switch back to Ness. Ness is fighting the males, wishing that she had ataraxia. And the name that she named the sword ataraxia actually means inner peace. Switch back to Az and Cass. Az tells Cass to run, grabs Eris, and takes off. But Cass can't move because Breland has showed up and she's got the crown on her head and she's controlling Cass. Switch back to Ness. She is fighting Belias. He is talking smack. There's a light in the sky when Emery and Gwen touch the stone and get winnowed to safety. Nesta is fighting Belias, and she gets knocked down. She keeps getting knocked down, but she keeps getting back up. Like, she's just not giving up. Then Cass shows up and kills Belias, and she thinks, oh, good, I'm saved. And then Cass says, now I'm going to cut your pretty throat. Breland shows up. She has set all this up, all of it, them getting dropped into the blood rite, because she knew that if they got dropped into blood rite, they couldn't use any magic. So Nesta would be weakened. Her fighting all these males, because again, it would weaken her further, and this would be her chance to kill Nesta. So Breland wants the trove. She's like, tell me where the trove is, call the items, you can summon the items and give them to me. And Nesta's like, no. So Breland tells Cassian, kill. But she doesn't say kill Nesta, kill her. She just says kill. So Cass goes to turn the knife on himself rather than hurt Nesta. But then the sun comes up. Nesta's power is restored. Nesta jumps on Breland and unmakes her. Yes, honey. Yes. Nesta unmade that heifer. She sure did. Weren't nothing left but some ashes in that crown. Yup. So Az and Moore show up. Feyre is bleeding. So they go back to the river house. Maja, who is the healer, doesn't want to do the C-section, but Feyre orders it as the High Lady, and Maja doesn't have any choice but to obey her. So Maja gets the baby out, but he's not moving. We think that he's dead. Feyre is dying. So Nesta calls the trove to her. She already had the crown on her head. So she calls the harp and the mask to her. She plucks the last string on the harp, which basically like freezes time. She's got the mask on her face that calls back the dead. And she gets on her knees. Oh. She gets on her knees beside Feyre's bed and leans over Feyre crying. And just says over and over and over, I give it all back. I'll give it all back. The power I took, everything. If you'll just help me save them, I give it all back. You can have it all back. Whew, y'all. Oh. Using case of tears from books. A light comes down over Nesta and Feyre, and then over the baby. And then the baby is full term and crying. Ness has a new tattoo where she's made a bargain with the cauldron. Reese falls on his knees and thanks Nesta. And Nesta gets on her knees and hugs Reese. Yes, y'all. Like, okay. All the happy endings. Everybody making up. Reese and Feyre name the baby Nyx. Ness actually tells Cass that she loves him and that she wants a mating ceremony. Reese is showering Nesta with, like, presents. And she's like, okay, seriously, you gotta stop. Like, just throw me a nice mating ceremony. And, of course, Reese goes, like, completely over the top for her and Cassian's mating ceremony. Feyre paints a portrait of Nesta holding the pass and hangs it in the river house. Ugh. And Reese gifts her the House of Wind. And then Feyre, Elaine, and Nesta and Nyx all go to see their father's grave. And Nesta leaves the little wooden rose figurine. And that's it. That's where the book leaves off. Just a crying. Because this book was so good. Oh my gosh. I love it so much. And I can't wait for the next one, but I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to. So here was a weird kind of thought that I had. Because I want Elaine and Azriel together. I do. But I also want Azriel and Gwen together. So, I don't know who I want Az to end up with. But then here was another thought that I had while I was reading this. Because they keep making these references to... Because Elaine loves to garden, right? And in the epilogue, Reese and Feyre are talking about Elaine. And he says, you know, maybe Elaine plays the nice one because that's what everybody expects her to be. Maybe she is just living up to everyone's expectations of her. And then he says, you know, Elaine loves her garden and everybody thinks it's all about growing pretty things, but you have to get your hands dirty to do it. And so I think Reese is saying don't underestimate Elaine. And I think it's also like a prelude to the next book. So I think maybe the next book will be Elaine's book. But my thought was, what if Elaine is supposed to be with Tamlin? Now, Elaine is mated with Lucien, right? She and Lucien are mates, but she has rejected that mating bond. Like, she won't even speak to Lucien. Like, it kind of made me mad at the winter solstice thing because Lucien got her a gift and she didn't even say thank you. Like, she wouldn't even look at him. She didn't even say thank you or anything. Like, girl, you could at least be like, look, dude, you're nice. Thank you for the present. But I don't really want this mating bond. I don't even know how it works because, like, I used to be human. So, thanks, but no thanks. Like, you could just do something like that, Elaine. Like, something. So, I don't know. But the reason I think Spring Court, because Nesta says something at one point in the book when they're visiting the Spring Court about how much Elaine would love the Spring Court because there's all these gardens and all these things growing and all these flowers. And so, I don't know. That's just my what if kind of scenario. And I might be way off. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah. So anyway, that was A Court of Silver Flames. I loved this book. It is now my favorite Sarah J. Maas book. So yeah. I hope you guys loved it. If you have any comments, drop them in the box. See you later. Bye.